They dressed Vesper Rowe in the Iron Feather Cloak, so the whole kingdom could watch her become no one. The cloak was brought into the royal hall on a pole of black ashwood, carried by 4 guards who would not touch it with bare hands. It hung heavy and dark, each feather forged from thin iron, each quill sharpened like a little blade. When the guards lowered it onto Vesper's shoulders, the first row of nobles leaned back as if scentlessness might spread through the air like plague. Vesper did not bow beneath the weight. That was the only defiance she could afford. In Thornmere, scent was law before ink ever dried. A child's first scent named its bloodline. A wolf's second scent confirmed its pack. Mates found one another by it. Courts swore truth by it. The dead were remembered by it. To have no scent was not merely strange. It was evidence of absence. Vesper Rowe had no scent at all. No winter pine, no rain-wolf musk, no hearth smoke, no bloodline trace. Hounds passed her without lifting their heads. Wolves looked through her as if her body cast no mark upon the world. Even as a child, when she cried in the servants' yard, the kennel wolves did not come. Nothing in Thornmere had ever claimed her by nose or blood, so the court called her unheld. Then Packless, then dangerous. Tonight, they made it ceremonial. High Vowkeeper Lord Thalric Hallowick stood before the crescent dais in robes of black wool stitched with silver thread. He was an old man with a scholar's thin hands and a butcher's calm eyes. Around his throat hung the chain of testimony, each link carved with the name of an ancient court vow. "The Iron Feather Cloak is not punishment," he announced to the gathered court. "It is mercy. A scentless body cannot be trusted inside pack walls. Without scent, there can be no oath. Without oath, there can be no belonging." Vesper kept her eyes on the stone floor. The cloak bit into her shoulders. Every iron feather was cold, too cold. Not like metal stored in winter, but like something that had been waiting in a grave for warmth to punish. A noblewoman near the front whispered, "She should have been marked years ago." Another answered, "The cloak will show if there is anything in her worth keeping." Vesper heard them both. She had always heard too much. When no one could smell her, they forgot she had ears. Lord Thalric lifted one hand toward the high throne. By Thornmere law, the girl with no scent must wear the Iron Feather Cloak until dawn. If no feather recognizes a pack oath upon her, she will be declared outside Thornmere protection. The words were clean. Their meaning was not. Outside protection meant no den could shelter her, no kitchen could employ her, no border guard would stop a wolf from taking her. It was not an execution. Thornmere preferred punishments that left hunger and winter to finish what law began. Alpha King Rowan Veythorne sat on the throne of antlered stone. He wore black armor beneath a mantle of dark wolf fur, his hair falling loose around a face too stern to invite mercy. His eyes were pale gray, almost silver, but there was no softness in them. He looked like a man carved from storm cloud and command. Behind him stood his wolf shadow. At least, it should have stood. The shape behind the throne was enormous, but wrong. A giant wolf of smoke and moonlight crouched against the wall, its head lowered, its ribs torn through with thin white lines, not wounds from blades. Vesper knew blade wounds. These lines looked like writing. Oaths. The realization struck so sharply she nearly lifted her head. The king's wolf shadow was covered in vows. Not proud vows, not loyal ones. These were hooks disguised as promises, thin, glowing words biting under the wolf's fur. Every time a courtier murmured, "Long may he rule," one of the white lines tightened. No one else seemed to see it, or they had trained themselves not to. Rowan's gaze moved over Vesper, the cloak, her bare hands, her scentless body made public shame. For one breath, his eyes narrowed, not in pity, in recognition of something out of place. Lord Thalric saw that narrowing and spoke quickly. "The judgment requires the king's word." The hall became still. Vesper felt the cloak shift on her shoulders. One iron feather scraped her throat like a warning. Rowan looked at Thalric. What crime has she committed? A murmur rippled through the court. Thalric smiled without warmth. Majesty, scentlessness is not a crime. It is a condition. You are asking me to exile her for a condition. I am asking you to protect the pack from what cannot swear. The wolf shadow behind Rowan shuddered. A white oath line tightened across its throat. Rowan's hand closed over the arm of the throne. Vesper saw pain pass through him, so fast most would mistake it for irritation. The king's jaw clenched. His wolf shadow lowered its head another inch, as if the vow spoken in his name had cut deeper than any enemy claw. Proceed with the judgment, Rowan said. Vesper did not hate him for it. That frightened her. She had expected cruelty. Cruelty was simple, but his voice carried the strain of a man speaking with a blade against something living behind him. He was not free inside the words he used. Lord Thalric turned toward her. Step into the oath circle. The circle waited at the center of the hall, carved into white stone and filled with black sand. Vesper walked toward it slowly, the cloak dragging behind her with the sound of knives over bone. No one touched her. No one needed to. Humiliation could walk by itself if law gave it a path. She stepped into the circle. The black sand stirred. Thalric raised the chain of testimony. By scent, blood, den, and vow, reveal what holds her. The cloak tightened. Every iron feather lifted slightly from Vesper's shoulders. Pain cut across her back as the quills sank through the fabric of her dress, not into flesh, but into something colder beneath skin. The court leaned forward, waiting for the cloak to reject her, to strip her of the last fragile fiction that she belonged anywhere near them. Instead, one feather snapped free. It flew across the hall, straight toward the throne. Rowan stood at once. The feather struck the air before his wolf shadow and melted into a black shield over one of the glowing oath wounds. The wolf shadow lifted its head. The entire hall fell silent. Then a second feather tore from Vesper's cloak. Then a third. Then 20. Iron feathers ripped free in a storm, slicing through candle smoke and noble gasps, not attacking the court, not fleeing Vesper, but flying to the dying wolf behind the Alpha King. They layered over its wounded ribs, its throat, its torn shoulder, each feather becoming a shard of black armor. Rowan stared at Vesper as if the world had shifted under his throne. Lord Thalric's face went white. The last feather remained at Vesper's collarbone, trembling like a bird afraid to wake. Then it turned inward and cut through the invisible seal over her chest. For the first time in her life, Vesper smelled something. Reng Oion. Wolf blood. A royal vow breaking. And beneath it all, her own scent, fierce and hidden, rising like storm feathers from a locked cage. Rowan's wounded wolf shadow opened its eyes. It did not bow. It did not claim her. It looked directly at Vesper as if it had just recognized the only shield in the room. For 3 heartbeats, no one in Thornmere remembered how to speak. The iron feather cloak hung almost bare from Vesper's shoulders, stripped of its punishment, and left with only black seams, torn quills, and the single trembling feather at her collarbone. Across the hall, the rest of the cloak had become armor over the Alpha King's wolf shadow. The beast looked larger now, not healed, shielded. The glowing oath lines still cut beneath its smoke and moonlight fur, but where the iron feathers had settled, the wounds no longer tightened. They held like covered blades, dangerous but briefly denied their bite. Vesper stood in the oath circle, breathing too fast, the first scent of her life still rising through her chest. Rayon, wolf blood, a royal vow breaking. Her own scent should have made her feel whole. Instead, it made her terrified, because the entire court smelled it too. Not fully, not as wolves should smell a packmate, not yet. But enough for heads to lift, enough for nostrils to flare, enough for Lady Marit of Greybriar to press 2 fingers to her pearl throat and whisper, "That was not there before." Lord Thalric Hallowick struck the floor with the chain of testimony. The silver links rang like small bones. Seal the circle. The guards moved at once. Black spears lowered around Vesper, their iron tips pointing not at her body but at the cloak's torn edges, as if the missing feathers might return and cut out their eyes. Rowan came down from the throne. He did not rush. Kings did not rush before courts that watched for weakness. But with every step, the hall changed around him. Nobles lowered their gazes. Guards drew back. Even the black sand in the oath circle stilled when his shadow crossed it. His wolf shadow tried to follow. The beast rose halfway behind the throne, covered in iron feathers, then staggered. A white oath line flared at its throat, and Rowan's jaw tightened at the same instant. Vesper saw it. The wound pulled both of them, not in the same way. The wolf suffered openly. The king had learned to make pain look like temper. Rowan stopped at the edge of the circle. "Lower your spears." No one moved. Lord Thalric stepped forward. "Majesty, the circle is active. Until we know what she has awakened, no hand should." I said lower them. The guards obeyed. Slowly. Vesper should have felt safer. She did not. A king standing close was still a king. A blade lowered was still a blade if the hand holding it had not chosen mercy. Rowan Veythorne looked at her as if she were no longer a condemned girl, but a question with teeth. "What are you?" he asked. The court inhaled. Vesper swallowed. The last feather at her collarbone scraped the hollow of her throat. "I do not know." It was the worst possible answer. It was also the only true one. Thalric's face hardened with satisfaction, a convenient ignorance. Vesper turned her head toward him. "You brought the cloak." And the cloak answered falsely. "No," Rowan said. One word. The hall quieted again. The Alpha King's eyes remained on the iron feathers shielding his wolf shadow. The cloak answered something. Thalric's hand closed around the chain of testimony. "Majesty, with respect, the Iron Feather Cloak was forged for exile judgments. It identifies false pack, oaths, oathless blood, and denless bodies. It has never flown to my wolf." Thalric paused. Rowan looked at him then, and Vesper felt the temperature in the hall fall. "Say that part clearly." The old vow-keeper bowed his head by a fraction. "It has never behaved in this manner." The wolf shadow breathed behind the throne. The sound moved through the hall like storm wind under a door. Vesper's hidden scent rose stronger in answer. Several wolves among the noble guard whined before they could stop themselves. Shame flashed across their faces. Thalric noticed. So did Rowan. The Alpha King stepped into the oath circle. The black sand stirred violently around his boots. Vesper backed away on instinct, but the circle was small, and the bare cloak dragged behind her. Rowan stopped the moment she moved. His gaze flicked to her hands, her shoulders, the red marks where the iron weight had bitten through her dress. His voice lowered. "Did it hurt you?" The question was quiet enough that only those nearest the circle heard it. Vesper hated that it reached her. Pain was easier when no one named it. "Yes." Rowan's eyes sharpened, but he did not apologize. Perhaps kings were not trained for apology. Perhaps he knew apology would change nothing while Thalric still held the law like a knife. "Did you command the feathers?" he asked. "No." "Did you know they would move?" "No." "Did you know my wolf was wounded?" She hesitated. That hesitation condemned her before half the court. Thalric lifted his chin. There. She saw what no loyal subject should see, a hidden royal weakness. Rowan did not look away from Vesper. "Answer." She forced her hands to stop trembling. "I saw lines on him, white lines, like writing under fur." The wolf shadow growled. Not at her. At the words, Rowan's face went still. Thalric spoke too quickly. "Moon, sight fever. Scentless bodies sometimes invent marks to explain what they cannot smell." Vesper looked at him. "Then why did the feather cover one?" A murmur broke through the hall before Thalric could stop it. Rowan lifted his hand. Silence returned. He stepped closer, just enough that Vesper could see the faint silver scar running through his lower lip, old and nearly hidden. He smelled of winter stone, dark fur, and something beneath it that should have been stronger but had been thinned almost to absence. Not no scent. A starving scent. A king being drained one vow at a time. Vesper swayed. Rowan reached as if to steady her, then stopped before touching her. The restraint struck her harder than touch would have. In Thornmere, everyone had avoided touching her because she was nothing. He stopped because he knew she had the right to refuse. "Tell me what you smell," he said. Thalric went rigid. "Majesty." Rowan's eyes did not leave Vesper. "Tell me." She could have lied. She wanted to. A girl with no scent had survived by giving powerful people very little of herself. But the iron feather at her collarbone turned warm, not burning, waiting. Vesper drew one breath. "I smell rain on iron," she said. "Wolf blood, a vow breaking." Rowan's wolf shadow lifted its head higher. "And beneath that?" Rowan asked. Vesper's throat tightened. The court leaned in. "My own scent," she whispered. "But it feels locked, like something woke only because your wolf was bleeding." The last iron feather snapped free from her collarbone. It did not fly to the wolf shadow. It hovered between Vesper and Rowan, spinning slowly, black as a raven's wing. Then its sharp quill pointed toward Lord Thalric Hallowick. The chain of testimony around his throat hissed. A single silver link cracked. Thalric covered it with his hand, but too late. Rowan saw. Vesper smelled the new scent immediately. Old parchment, cold fear, a vow pretending to be loyalty. The cracked link bled a thin line of white light across Thalric's fingers, and from somewhere deep beneath the royal hall, an unseen wolf began to howl. Not Rowan's wolf shadow, something older, something buried. And every remaining iron feather on the king's wounded wolf turned its edge toward the vow-keeper. The howl beneath the royal hall made every candle burn sideways. It did not sound like a living wolf. It sounded like stone remembering teeth. Vesper stood frozen inside the oath circle, the bare seams of the Iron Feather Cloak clinging to her shoulders while the last loose feather hovered in the air, its black quill aimed at Lord Thalric Hallowick's throat. Across the hall, Rowan's wolf shadow lowered itself into a crouch, iron feathers bristling along its wounded ribs. The court had heard wolves howl before. War wolves, mating wolves, mourning wolves when a pack burned its dead beneath winter pines. This was none of those. This howl came from under the throne. Rowan turned slowly toward Lord Thalric. "What is buried beneath my hall?" Thalric's face had regained its color too quickly. That made Vesper more afraid of him, not less. Men who panicked openly were dangerous for a moment. Men who swallowed panic and smiled were dangerous for years. "Royal foundations," Thalric said. "Old stone, old bones. Every throne is built on something, Majesty." The cracked link on his chain of testimony glowed beneath his fingers. Vesper smelled the lie. Not a simple lie, a layered one. Old parchment, cold fear, wet feathers buried in ash. She pressed one hand against her chest, where her own scent still strained like a caged storm. The scent frightened her because it did not feel new. It felt hidden, as if something had been folded inside her since birth, waiting for the correct wound to open the lock. Rowan looked at her. "Say it." Thalric's eyes flashed. "Majesty, the girl is unstable. Her scent has just broken through after years of absence. Her senses cannot be trusted." Rowan did not move his gaze from Vesper. "I did not ask you." That small dismissal struck the court harder than a shout. Vesper drew a careful breath. "There is a lie under the hall." A ripple of discomfort passed through the nobles. She forced herself to continue. "Not just in the stones, in the vows. The chain around his throat is tied to whatever howled." Thalric's hand tightened on the cracked link. "A scentless girl invents what she cannot understand. I am not scentless now." The words left Vesper before fear could stop them. The hall went quiet. For all her life, others had named her absence. No scent, no oath, no pack, no belonging. Saying the opposite felt less like pride and more like stepping onto thin ice. Rowan heard the tremor beneath it. His expression did not soften, but something in his eyes sharpened around her, as if he had marked the cost of that sentence. No, he said. You are not. The wolf shadow behind him breathed once. The iron feathers along its body shifted toward Vesper, not leaving the wolf, only angling like shields that recognized the direction of a coming arrow. Lord Thalric lifted the chain of testimony from his throat. Vesper smelled danger before she understood it. Then let her scent be judged properly, he said. If it is true scent, the court will know. If it is borrowed scent, stolen from the king's wounded wolf, we will know that too. Rowan's face darkened. You will not put her through another spectacle. Majesty, Thalric said, bowing only with his neck. This is no spectacle. This is the scent rite. Even royal heirs submit to it. That rite is performed at first moon, not in a hall full of knives. She has missed every first moon she ever had. The cruelty was smooth enough that several nobles lowered their eyes to hide approval. Vesper felt the old humiliation reach for her. It knew where to cut. A girl with no scent could endure insults about being unwanted, packless, unnatural. But a girl whose scent had finally risen could lose it again before everyone if Thalric made the rite into a trap. Rowan stepped between her and the vow-keeper. The movement was not grand. It did not proclaim devotion. It simply placed his body where the court's hunger had been looking. Enough, he said. The white oath lines across his wolf shadow flared. Rowan staggered half a step. Vesper smelled the vow tighten. Protect the court from what cannot be sworn. The phrase had been spoken earlier by Thalric. Now, it bit into the king's wolf because Rowan had moved against the judgment. The court vows were punishing him for resisting their shape. Vesper understood then with a coldness that reached her bones. The curse was not one spell. It was made from approved words. Every loyal phrase, every ceremonial answer, every court promise had been braided into a net around Rowan's wolf shadow. The more he ruled by their vows, the more the net tightened. The more he protected someone the vows had named dangerous, the more his wolf paid. Stop, she whispered. Rowan looked back. Pain had paled his mouth, but his voice remained controlled. No. The word struck her strangely. Not soft, not kind, but costly. The wolf shadow's throat wound opened wider beneath the iron feathers. One feather cracked. Vesper moved before thought could become fear. She stepped around Rowan and lifted her bare hand toward the wounded shadow. Every guard reached for a weapon. Rowan caught her wrist. Not hard, fast. His hand was warm, strong, and shaking with restraint. The contact sent her new scent spiraling upward rain on iron, wolf blood, and something darker from him, like a storm trapped under stone. Do not touch it, he said. My wolf kills what reaches too close. Vesper looked at the giant wounded beast. It watched her with eyes like old moonlight under smoke. No, she said quietly. It has been killing what was forced into it. Rowan's grip loosened, but he did not let go. The contact between them filled the space with tension sharp enough to make the nearest nobles stare. Not mate recognition, not yet. Something more dangerous in that moment, trust being asked before either of them had earned it. Vesper looked at his hand around her wrist. Let me choose. His jaw tightened. Then he released her. She touched the nearest iron feather shielding his wolf shadow. The hall vanished for one breath. Vesper saw a dark chamber beneath the throne, its walls packed with old black feathers. At the center lay a white wolf skeleton wrapped in chains of silver words. Its skull lifted toward her, though no flesh remained, and in its ribcage burned a single ember shaped like a wing. A voice scraped through her bones. Feather oath blood returns when royal wolves bleed under false vows. Vesper gasped back into the hall. The iron feather under her hand melted into silver light. Rowan's wolf shadow exhaled, and one glowing oath line snapped cleanly from its ribs. Lord Thalric shouted, "Seize her!" But before the guards could move, the floor of the oath circle cracked open beneath Vesper's feet. From the darkness below rose a single white bone feather, ancient, sharp, and still wet with moonlight. It turned in the air, then pointed directly at Rowan's heart. The white bone feather pointed at Rowan's heart as if it remembered where the king was weakest. Every wolf in the hall growled, not at Vesper, at the feather. The sound moved through Thornmere's royal court like a living storm, rising from guards, nobles, servants, even the old werewolves chained beside the pillars. Their fur bristled, their eyes flashed silver, yet none of them lunged. Some instinct older than obedience held them back, warning them that the thing rising from the cracked oath circle was not prey. It was evidence. Vesper stood above the opening in the floor, the torn Iron Feather Cloak hanging from her shoulders like the remains of a broken sentence. Cold air breathed up from beneath the hall, carrying the scent of buried feathers, old moonlight, and wolves that had died without being mourned. Rowan did not look away from the bone feather. His face was calm, too calm. Only the pulse at the side of his throat betrayed him. Lord Thalric Hallowick raised the chain of testimony with both hands. The cracked silver link had stopped bleeding light, but the metal around it looked blackened now, as if burned from within. "Majesty," he said, voice ringing across the hall. "The ancient feather has judged. It points to your heart because that is where her danger leads." Vesper's breath caught. The court seized the meaning before truth could defend itself. She drew it from below. She aimed it at him. No scent, then stolen scent, now a bone relic. She is marked against the king. Rowan lifted one hand. The whispers died. He stepped toward the feather. Vesper moved before she knew she meant to. "Don't." The word crossed the hall too quickly, too nakedly. Several nobles turned toward her with hungry interest, as if concern itself were proof of treason. Rowan stopped, not because she commanded him, but because he heard something in her voice she had not meant to reveal. "What do you see?" he asked. Vesper stared at the bone feather. Its white surface was not smooth. Tiny lines moved along it, curling and uncurling like script written by a trembling hand. Every time Rowan breathed, the letters brightened. "It is not pointing to where it wants to strike," she said slowly. "It is pointing to where something is tied." Thalric's eyes narrowed. Rowan's wolf shadow lifted its head higher behind him, iron feathers still plated over its wounds. One of the covered oath lines pulsed at the exact rhythm of Rowan's heart. Vesper understood a little more, and wished she did not. "The curse is not only on your wolf," she whispered. "It is anchored through you." Rowan's expression did not change, but the hall felt the blow. Even a powerful king had limits to what could remain hidden, once spoken aloud in front of a court trained to smell weakness. Thalric stepped forward. "Enough. She names royal vulnerabilities as if reading them from an open book. This is how forbidden bloodlines begin their work. They do not kill kings first. They isolate them." Vesper turned on him. "You are afraid of what the feather will name." His smile was thin. "I am afraid of what happens when a pack lets a scentless girl invent sacred law. I am not inventing it." "Then prove it." The challenge fell too neatly. Rowan's gaze cut to Thalric. Too late. The Vowkeeper had already drawn a short ceremonial blade from inside his sleeve and sliced his palm across the chain of testimony. Blood ran over the links. The entire chain flared white. "The Centrite is invoked," Thalric declared, "before king, court, and buried witness." The nobles rose as one, not by choice. Vesper saw their faces twist with surprise as their bodies obeyed. The court vows pulled them upright like puppets strung from the ceiling. Rowan's wolf shadow snarled. The iron feathers along its body shivered. Thalric looked at Vesper. "If your scent is true, the rite will reveal the oath that holds it. If your scent is stolen, it will return to the one you stole from." "And if the rite is poisoned?" Vesper asked. A flicker. Small. Nearly nothing. But Rowan saw it. Vesper smelled it. Cold fear under old parchment. The bone feather turned in the air, still aimed at Rowan's heart, and began to drip moonlight onto the cracked floor. Each drop struck the black sand and became a tiny white flame. Rowan moved closer to Vesper, not in front of her this time, but beside her. The court noticed. So did Thalric. "Majesty," the Vowkeeper warned. The right requires distance, no royal influence, no protective interference. Rowan's voice was low. My court has interfered enough for one night. The white oath lines on his wolf shadow tightened. Pain crossed his face. Vesper smelled the curse bite. Without thinking, she reached for him, then stopped. He looked down at her hand, hovering between them, not touching, asking and refusing at once. A dangerous, fragile silence opened. Rowan gave a single nod. Vesper placed 2 fingers against the back of his hand. The contact was brief, but the world sharpened. Her hidden scent rose like rain striking hot iron. Rowan's scent answered beneath the thinning curse winter stone, black pine, blood-warmed fur, and a grief so controlled it had hardened into command. His wolf shadow exhaled. One iron feather brightened over its ribs. Thalric's chain screamed. Not rang. Screamed. The scent rite began. White light shot from the chain of testimony and wrapped around Vesper's throat, not tight enough to choke, but tight enough to claim the shape of a collar. The court watched, breathless, as the light forced her hidden scent outward. Rain on iron filled the hall. Then wolf blood. Then something no one expected. Feathers burning under snow. Every old wolf in the hall lowered its head. Not in worship. In recognition. Thalric's face hardened. Name your pack. Vesper could not speak. The right held her throat. The white bone feather floated closer to Rowan's chest. Thalric repeated louder. Name your pack. Vesper tried to answer. Nothing came. Panic rose inside her. She had waited her whole life to have a scent, and now the first law that demanded it would use her silence as proof against her. The court leaned forward, eager for collapse, eager to return her to absence. Then the buried howl sounded again beneath the hall. The white bone feather split down its center. Inside it was a thread of black iron, thin as hair, tied around a tiny rolled vow. The feather had not come to accuse Rowan. It had come to show what was piercing him. Rowan reached for it. Thalric shouted, Majesty, no! Rowan took the vow thread in his hand. Blood immediately opened across his palm. Vesper felt the light around her throat loosen. She spoke before it could close again. I have no pack name, she said, voice shaking but clear, because mine was cut out before I could inherit it. The hall went utterly still. The buried chamber beneath the oath circle answered. Stone cracked wider. From below rose a ring of ancient black feathers, circling Vesper like a crown made for the shoulders, not the head. And from the darkness under the throne, the white wolf skeleton whispered one word. Guardian. Vesper forgot the court existed. One moment she was kneeling beside the cracked oath circle with Rowan's blood warm against her palms. The next, every sound in the royal hall seemed to fall away except the breath rising from beneath the throne. Not a ghost's breath. Not memory. Living. The ancient black feathers circling her shoulders slowed in the air. Rowan stood beside her, his wounded wolf shadow armored in pieces of the Iron Feather Cloak, its moonlit eyes fixed on the darkness below. The old white wolf skeleton remained half-risen from the broken floor, silver word chains wrapped around its ribs, but beyond it, behind a wall of buried feathers, someone moved. Vesper's throat tightened so hard she could barely speak. My mother is dead. Lord Thalric Hallowick answered too quickly. She is whatever the buried relic wants you to believe. The lie was neat, almost convincing. Then Vesper smelled it. Not the sharp scent of court deception, not old parchment or cold fear this time. Something softer cut through the hall. Milk faded into smoke, winter cloth, a woman's skin after fever, and rainwater held in iron. Her knees nearly failed. Rowan's hand caught her elbow before she fell. He did not pull her back. He only steadied her, as if he understood that the next step had to be hers. The court noticed the touch. Thalric noticed more. Majesty, he warned, if you let her answer that voice, the right is no longer under royal control. Rowan looked down at the blood-black thread still biting into his palm. It has not been undermined for years. A dangerous silence followed. The old vow-keeper's face tightened. Beneath the floor, the hidden woman spoke again, weaker this time. Vesper, not daughter, her name, that broke something in her more cleanly than grief ever had. All her life, people had spoken around her absence. No scent, no pack, no oath, no claim. But the voice below did not call her by wound or use. It called her as if she had been remembered every day she had been missing. Vesper stepped toward the opening. The black feathers followed. Thalric lifted the chain of testimony. The cracked links flared white, and every noble in the hall stiffened under the pull of old court vows. No one approaches the lower foundation, he declared. By Thornmere's first law, what was buried for the safety of the crown remains buried. The words struck Rowan's wolf shadow like arrows. 3 white lines burned across its throat. Rowan staggered, breath catching. Vesper felt the pain travel through his hand into hers. The curse did not need blades. It used lawful phrases. It used obedience. It punished the king whenever he moved against the vows that were killing him. The black feathers around Vesper's shoulders dropped lower. This time, they did not wait in a circle. They formed a mantle. One feather touched her back, then another, then many. Pain drove the air from her lungs, but it was not the same as the Iron Feather Cloak. That cloak had been forced onto her as shame. These feathers settled with the terrible weight of choice, as if each one asked whether she would stand between a royal wolf and the words meant to destroy it. Vesper's hidden scent rose hard enough to make the guards' wolves whine. Rain on iron, feathers under snow, a sealed pack name trying to breathe. She looked at Thalric. You did not bury danger under this hole. His eyes darkened. You buried witnesses. The white wolf skeleton opened its jaws without sound. The silver word chains across its ribs cracked once. Vesper saw the memory in a flash, a lower sanctuary filled with women and men wearing black feather mantles, their hands pressed against royal wolves wounded by false treaties. Vow keepers stood above them, recording loyalty oaths while secretly twisting them into leashes. When the guardians objected, the court named them disloyal. When they defended the wolves, the court called them beast servants. One by one, their scents were sealed. Their names were cut from pack ledgers. Their bodies were carried beneath the throne. Then one woman escaped long enough to bear a child. Vesper saw her mother kneeling in snow, clutching an infant to her breast as young Thalric pressed black wax against the baby's chest. Seal her scent, her mother had begged. If they smell what she is, they will make her shield kings before she knows her own name. Thalric had smiled then, younger but no less cold. Then she will belong to no one. Better no one, her mother whispered, than yours. The vision broke. Vesper returned to the hall with tears hot in her eyes and black feathers locked across her shoulders like living armor. Rowan had seen enough in her face to understand the wound before she spoke. He sealed you, he said. Vesper nodded once, and kept me close. Thalric's composure finally cracked. I kept a forbidden bloodline from waking inside a court that could not survive it. No, Vesper said. You kept a shield where you could reach it. Rowan's gaze turned lethal. For my wolf? Thalric did not answer. He did not need to. The chain around his throat answered for him. One link split open and released a thin silver scent, wolf blood, iron ink, and a vow hidden inside coronation rites. Rowan's wolf shadow rose behind him, iron feathers flashing dark and bright along its wounded body. For the first time that night, it looked less like a dying beast and more like a king's other half remembering rage. Thalric raised both hands. Think, Majesty. If she is what the buried dead claim, she does not belong to your court. She belongs to your wolf. A feather, oath-bearer, will choose the beast over the throne every time. Rowan looked at Vesper. The court waited for fear to enter his face. It did not, but neither did trust come easily. That was the honest thing. His kingdom was cracking open beneath him. His wolf was bleeding under lawful words, and the girl everyone had named Scentless now wore a mantle made for a buried order no king had controlled. Vesper held his gaze. I will not be used by your throne. A murmur ran through the hall. Rowan's answer came low. Then do not be. Thalric's eyes flashed with alarm. Vesper turned back to the opening in the floor. And I will not be used by your wolf, unless I choose it. The wolf shadow lowered its massive head, not bowing, listening. Below, the buried feathers pulled apart. A woman crawled from the darkness with silver chains around her wrists, her hair streaked white, her face hollowed by years beneath stone, but her eyes were Vesper's eyes. She reached one shaking hand toward the broken circle. Do not trust the cloak alone, she whispered. The king's killing vow is not on his wolf. Vesper went cold. Rowan stepped closer. Where is it? Her mother looked past Vesper, straight at the throne. In the coronation crown. Above the throne, black antlers trembled in their iron cradle. They had been there all night, half hidden behind banners of wolf-hide and old silver, a ceremonial relic most courtiers had stopped truly seeing. Thornmere called it the King's High Circlet, forged from the antlers of the first royal wolf after it died defending the northern passes. It was not worn at feasts. It was lowered only for coronations, blood treaties, executions of traitor alphas, and vows that bound the crown to the pack. Now it shook as if something trapped inside it had begun to wake. Rowan looked up. So did every noble. The iron feathers armoring his wolf shadow turned their sharpened edges toward the relic. A low sound rolled through the beast, not quite a growl, not yet a warning. Vesper felt it in her own bones, where her newly awakened scent still beat like rain against a sealed door. Her mother clung to the edge of the broken oath circle. She was alive, but only barely. The woman's wrists were ringed in silver word chains, each link biting into skin so pale it seemed carved from candle wax. Her hair, once dark in Vesper's vision, hung in white-streaked ropes around a face hollowed by years under stone. Yet her eyes were clear. Vesper's eyes. Rowan knelt and reached toward her. The woman flinched. Not from him, from the court behind him. Vesper saw the movement and stepped down into the cracked circle herself. Broken stones scraped her palms as she caught her mother's arm. The touch struck like a bell. For one breath, Vesper smelled childhood that had never happened. Wool blankets warmed beside an oven, rainwater caught in an iron bowl. A lullaby hummed into dark hair. A mother pressing her nose to an infant's head and weeping because the child's scent was already being buried. Vesper, her mother whispered. The name nearly broke her. But the hall was full of wolves waiting to see whether she would become daughter or weapon first. Vesper swallowed the ache. Can you stand? No. Her mother's gaze moved to Rowan, but he cannot remain standing long if Thalric opens the circlet. Lord Thalric Hallowick descended the dais with the chain of testimony clenched in one hand. Blood from the cracked links had stained his collar silver black. You have crawled out of a grave and still speak treason, Rowe. Mara. Vesper held the name in her mind as if it might vanish if she loosened her grip. Her mother turned her head slowly. You always called truth treason when it survived you. A murmur passed through the court. Thalric smiled thinly. Truth. You were sealed beneath this hall because Feather Oath blood betrayed the throne in the reign of King Alderic. Your order placed wolves above kings and instinct above law. Thornmere buried you because civilization requires rule. Rowan's voice came cold. Careful. Thalric bowed his head. Majesty, I speak history. No, Vesper said. The black feather mantle across her shoulders tightened. Pain spread down her spine, but beneath it came clarity. The feathers did not give her memories exactly. They gave her pressure, scent, shape. They made lies feel heavier than truth. You speak the part that leaves your hands clean. Thalric's eyes snapped to her. Vesper rose from the broken circle, one hand still supporting her mother. The Guardians did not betray the throne. They refused to let vow keepers use royal wolves as anchors for court obedience. The black antlers above the throne shuddered harder. A thin line of white light ran along one curve. Rowan's wolf shadow recoiled. The oath wounds under its iron feather armor flared. Rowan drew a sharp breath and pressed one hand to his chest. Vesper saw the connection at once. The relic above the throne was not merely holding a curse against his wolf. It was pulling through him, using the king's own blood as the path between law and beast. Thalric lifted the chain of testimony. The scent rite is unfinished. The accused has not named her lawful pack. Rowan turned on him. She is no longer on trial. She is until the circle closes. The circle is broken. The law is not. The words struck the hall with unnatural force. Every banner snapped toward the throne. Every noble's oath ring glowed pale. Rowan's wolf shadow cried out, and one iron feather cracked across its throat. Vesper moved toward the dais. Rowan caught her wrist before she passed him. Again, not to imprison, to stop her from walking blind into a blade. "What are you doing?" he asked, closing what he opened. "If that relic is tied to my coronation vow, touching it could turn the curse through you." Vesper looked at his hand around her wrist, then at his face. He was not asking as a king. That made answering harder. "My mother was buried because she protected royal wolves from false law," Vesper said. "My scent was sealed because Thalric feared I would do the same." She drew one uneven breath. "If I walk away now, he was right to fear only what I was born with, not what I choose." Rowan's jaw tightened. Behind him, his wolf shadow lowered its wounded head, watching her with eyes bright beneath the iron armor. Still not claiming, still not kneeling, waiting. Rowan released her. "Then do not touch the relic alone." Vesper almost told him this was not his danger to share. Then she looked at the white oath lines cutting his wolf and remembered that it had always been shared. The court had simply made sure only he suffered visibly. Together, they climbed the first steps toward the throne. Thalric's calm finally broke. "Majesty, if she reaches the high circlet, the old buried order will have legal standing before the court. Every oath sworn since their extinction may be challenged." Rowan stopped. Slowly, he looked back. "So that is what you fear. Not his wolf becoming wild. Not Vesper becoming dangerous. Records, challenges, or the polished vows losing their unquestioned power." Thalric's mouth thinned. "I fear a kingdom undone by dead women and half-scented girls." Vesper felt her mother's hand tighten weakly around hers. That insult did not wound as it was meant to. It steadied her. She climbed higher. The iron cradle above the throne lowered by itself, chain by chain, until the black antler circlet hung before her face. Up close, she saw the writing carved along its inner rim. Not royal names, not victories, not blessings. "Come on. Kneel where the court commands. Bleed where the vow requires. Silence the wolf when law speaks." Rowan read them over her shoulder. A terrible stillness entered him. "This was placed on me when I was crowned." Mara's voice rose from below, broken but clear. "And every time you gave judgment beneath it, your wolf paid for obedience." The whole silence turned sick. Vesper lifted her hand. Before her fingers touched the circlet, Thalric drove the broken chain of testimony into the floor. White light exploded around the dais. The black antlers opened like jaws. A killing vow shot from the circlet, not toward Vesper, toward Rowan's wolf shadow. Vesper threw herself between them. The black feather mantle tore from her shoulders in a storm and formed a shield across the air. The impact knocked her backward into Rowan's arms. For one burning instant, her scent filled the entire royal hall. Not rain, not iron, not blood. A winged wolf beneath a storm moon. And far above the throne, every antler on the high circlet snapped inward toward her, as if the relic had recognized its true judge. The blast left no smoke. That was what frightened Vesper first. Magic that broke things left ash. Curses left stink. Old vows, when wounded, bled light. But the force that had struck her feather shield vanished into a silence so clean it seemed to have eaten sound from the air. She lay against Rowan's chest at the foot of the throne steps, his arm locked around her waist. The black feather mantle spread before them in a cracked shield of moonlit iron. Beyond it, his wolf shadow still stood, wounded, shaking, but alive. The killing vow had failed to reach it. For one terrible moment, no one moved. Then every wolf in the hall began to whine. Not from fear, from relief. Vesper tried to rise. Pain tore through her shoulders where the mantle had ripped itself away to form the shield. Rowan tightened his hold, then released her the instant she pushed against his arm. That small obedience stayed with her. So did the warmth of his hand before it left. "Can you stand?" he asked. His voice was low enough not to feed the court. Vesper nodded, though the answer was not entirely true. Rowan rose with her, placing himself half a step beside her rather than before her. His wolf shadow crouched behind them, iron feathers fractured across its throat and ribs. One covered wound had split open again, but the beast's eyes were sharper now, more present. It no longer looked only dying. It looked angry enough to survive. Lord Thalric Hallowick stood near the broken chain of testimony, breathing hard. A thin line of blood ran from his nose, silver under the candlelight. Yet his eyes were bright with a new calculation. He had lost control of the relic, so he reached for the law. "Witnesses of Thornmere," he said, voice cracking once before smoothing. "The accused has interfered with a royal coronation binding." The court stirred. Vesper felt the accusation shift the room beneath her feet. Accused. He had returned her to the first word before anyone could think too long about what she had just saved. Rowan's voice turned cold. She blocked a killing vow. "She blocked a crown judgment," Thalric corrected. "And if the old relic answered her, then by first law she must render judgment before the court." Mara, still half collapsed by the broken circle, lifted her head. "No." The word was weak. Thalric heard it and smiled. Vesper's mother tried to crawl forward, silver chains dragging across the stone. "Vesper, do not let him make you speak from the throne's mouth." Rowan looked between them. "What does that mean?" Mara's eyes filled with a fear that did not belong to a woman afraid for herself. "The circlet cannot lie, but it can narrow truth until it becomes a blade. A guardian who judges through it must answer the exact question the court asks. Thalric will not ask whether you saved the wolf. He will ask whether the king is safe to rule with it unbound." The hall tightened around that sentence. Vesper understood the trap. If she answered yes, every frightened noble would call her corrupted by the king's wolf. If she answered no, the circlet would make her words binding, and Rowan's own court would have law enough to chain him deeper. Thalric spread his hands. "I ask only what the kingdom deserves to know." "No," Vesper said. "You ask what frightens them enough to obey you." A few nobles looked away. Not many. Enough. The black antler relic hung above the throne steps, cracked from its own failed strike. Its inner carvings glowed pale, each command still alive, each phrase written to make obedience look sacred. Vesper felt it waiting for her. Not kindly, not cruelly, like a blade waiting for the hand that would decide whether it cut rope or throat. Rowan stepped closer to the relic. His wolf shadow growled. Vesper caught his sleeve before he touched the hanging antlers. "Do not." He looked down at her hand on his sleeve. Something passed between them, not recognition, not claim, but the strange intimacy of two people learning danger's shape at the same moment. "You stopped me before I walked into it," she said. "Let me return the favor." His eyes held hers. Then he stepped back. Thalric's face hardened at the silent exchange. The court waits. Vesper turned to the gathered nobles. "Then let the court hear the question I will answer." The vow-keeper's smile thinned. "Is Alpha King Rowan Veythorne safe to rule while his wolf is shielded by forbidden feather, oath blood?" The words landed exactly as Mara had warned. Several nobles inhaled sharply. Rowan did not react, but his wolf shadow did. The beast lowered its head, not in shame, but as if it expected the answer to wound and had decided to endure it. That nearly broke Vesper more than fear did. All night, the court had spoken of Rowan's wolf as if it were a disease attached to his crown, a beast to be measured, a danger to be contained. But she had seen the white lines cutting through it. She had felt the vows bite him when he tried to protect her. Whatever danger lived in his wolf had been made monstrous by chains. Vesper climbed the last step alone. The black feather mantle lifted with her, no longer shielding, no longer circling. It settled across her shoulders in broken layers, heavy enough to remind her that protection always had weight. She placed one hand on the black antler relic. The whole vanished. She stood in a cold, moonlit chamber filled with past coronations. Kings knelt one after another beneath the same antlers. Each swore to lead. Each wolf shadow stood behind him, proud and whole. Then the visions changed. Thalric's predecessors entered. The vows grew longer. The words grew tighter. Wolves lowered their heads. Kings gritted their teeth. The crown learned to speak over the beast. At last, she saw Rowan's coronation. Younger, harder, alone. Thalric stood behind him and lowered the circlet until its shadow crossed Rowan's brow. "Rule above hunger," Thalric whispered. Rowan repeated it. A white line appeared across his wolf shadow's throat. "Rule above instinct." Another line across its ribs. "Rule above the wolf." The young king hesitated. "Only once." Thalric leaned closer. "Or the court will call you beast before you can become king." Rowan spoke the vow. His wolf shadow screamed without sound. Vesper returned to the hall with cold fire in her lungs. The circlet demanded an answer. She gave one. "Rowan Veythorne is not unsafe because his wolf is shielded," she said. "He has been made unsafe because this court taught his wolf that being alive was treason." The antler relic cracked from base to tip. Thalric shouted, "Improper answer." "No," Rowan said. His voice was quiet. The hall heard him anyway. "It is the first proper answer this court has given me." The wolf shadow rose behind him. For the first time, the iron feathers did not merely cover its wounds. They sank into the white oath lines and began prying them open. Thalric seized the broken chain of testimony and wrapped it around his bleeding hand. "Then I invoke the second question," he snarled. "If the girl is a lawful shield, let her name the pack that gave her authority." Mara cried out. "Vesper knew!" Too late. The circlet turned beneath Vesper's palm. Its broken antlers pierced the air before her chest, not touching skin, but cutting into the seal over her scent. The court leaned forward as if waiting to watch her become scentless again. Vesper's breath stopped. A name rose inside her. Not Rowe, not Thornmere, not any pack she had ever heard spoken aloud. The black feathers across her shoulders flared silver white, and from beneath the throne, the buried white wolf opened its jaws and spoke the name with her. Stormwing. Every banner in Thornmere tore loose from its hook at once. They did not fall. They turned. Wolfhide standards, silver-threaded house flags, old war cloths blackened by smoke, all of them twisted toward Vesper as if a wind had entered the hall from beneath the world. The name spoken by the buried white wolf did not echo like sound. It passed through bone, blood, and old lore, waking things the court had spent generations pretending were dead. Stormwing. This time, Vesper did not flinch from the word. It hurt to hear it, but not like insult. It hurt like a door opening after years of pressing her hands against blank stone. Mara Rowe bowed her head against the cracked floor, tears cutting clean paths through the dust on her face. "Your grandmother's pack," she whispered. "The last shield," line before Thornmere buried the lower vows. Lord Thalric Hallowick struck the broken chain of testimony against the dais. "There is no Stormwing pack." The black feather mantle across Vesper's shoulders answered before she could. Its feathers flared silver at the edges. Behind Rowan, his wolf shadow rose higher, iron feathers still braced inside its wounds. The beast did not look at the court now. It looked at Thalric, and for the first time the old vow-keeper took half a step back. Rowan noticed. So did Vesper. The Alpha King's voice cut through the snapping banners. "If there is no such pack, why does the name frighten you?" Thalric recovered with practiced contempt. "Because dead names are useful to rebels. Give a forgotten girl a buried title, and she will believe herself ancient enough to judge kings." Vesper felt the antler relic under her palm pulse. The circlet wanted another answer, another narrow truth, another clean sentence that could be turned into a blade. She pulled her hand back before it could use her mouth again. The old relic shuddered, displeased. Rowan saw the effort it cost her. Step away from it. Thalric smiled. Yes, girl. Step away. Refuse the only law that named you. Vesper stopped. The trap was not in the crown this time. It was in shame. If she stepped back, the court would say she feared her own revealed name. If she stayed, the circlet would try to shape her into a tool. All her life she had been nothing in their mouths. Now they would make her too much. Rowan moved beside her, not touching. You do not owe them obedience because they finally found a word for you. The sentence was low, meant for her. It reached too deep. Thalric's expression sharpened. Majesty, be cautious. A king who counsels a named guardian against court procedure gives her standing to challenge his coronation. Rowan did not look away from Vesper, then let the court record it. A wave of shock passed through the nobles. Mara's head lifted. Vesper stared at him. You do not know what that gives me. No, Rowan said. But I know what was taken from you. The wolf shadow behind him gave a low, aching sound. The oath wounds across its throat still bled pale light. Even armored, it was weakening again. The killing vow had failed, but the old net remained inside Rowan's coronation words. Vesper could smell it now with terrible clarity. Each vow wrapped around the next, a beautiful cage built from noble fear. Thalric turned to the court. You hear him. He offers old blood the right to weigh the crown. Let the record open. The broken chain of testimony lifted from his hand by itself. Its cracked links stretched through the air, forming a silver circle above the dais. Inside it, pale images stirred. Rowan kneeling at his coronation, Thalric lowering the black antler circlet, nobles pledging loyalty, the wolf shadow standing whole behind the young king before the first oath cut it. Then the vision shifted. A hidden line appeared beneath every spoken vow. If the king's wolf rises against court law, let the crown sever beast from blood. Vesper went cold. Rowan read it too. His face hardened into something beyond anger. You wrote a severance clause into my coronation. Thalric's voice remained calm. I preserved the throne against animal rule. You prepared to cut my wolf out of me, if necessary. The court recoiled from the plainness of it. Not enough. Some nobles were horrified. Others looked relieved, as if a secret fear had finally been given respectable language. Vesper smelled them all. Fear of wildness, fear of old packs, fear of a king whose wolf could choose mercy before law allowed it, fear of a girl whose scent had returned carrying a name their records could not erase. The silver circle above the dais tightened. Thalric lifted his bleeding hand. By revealed standing, the Stormwing remnant must now answer. Does the Alpha King's wolf endanger Thornmere? Mara tried to rise. Vesper, he is forcing judgment. Vesper already knew. If she said no, Thalric would claim her blood was bound to Rowan's beast. If she said yes, the severance clause would awaken and tear the wolf shadow from the king. The question had only two doors, and both led into his knife. Rowan's gaze found hers. There was no plea in it. That almost hurt more. He would not ask her to save him by lying. He would not command her to carry his danger. He only stood beneath the weight of what his crown had hidden and let her see the cost. Vesper stepped down from the dais. The court murmured in confusion. Thalric's eyes narrowed. Answer the question. I will. She crossed the hall toward Rowan's wolf shadow. The beast lowered its head, not docile, not tame. Its teeth were still long enough to end her in one bite. Its eyes were stormlit and wounded and anciently proud. Vesper stopped before it. The iron feathers shielding its wounds trembled as if recognizing the mantle on her shoulders. She lifted her hand, then paused. Rowan's voice came behind her. Vesper. She looked back. His expression was controlled, but his fingers had curled into a fist at his side. Not to stop her, to stop himself from reaching. She understood. The wolf might kill what touched too close, or it might finally reveal what the court had done to it. Vesper placed her palm against the largest iron feather over its throat. Pain opened like a door. She saw Rowan's coronation again, but deeper. The moment after the severance clause was hidden, when the young king's wolf shadow had tried to tear free and run toward the lower chamber beneath the throne. Not to attack. To answer something buried there. The white wolf skeleton. The Stormwing witnesses. The guardians who had not betrayed the crown but had guarded royal wolves from becoming obedient ghosts. Thalric had not chained Rowan's wolf because it was dangerous. He had chained it because it remembered where the bodies were. Vesper drew a breath full of wolf blood and storm iron. Then she turned to the court. "The Alpha King's wolf does endanger Thornmere," she said. Thalric's smile flashed. Rowan's wolf shadow went still. Vesper continued before the severance vow could close. "It endangers every lie buried under this throne. It endangers every law written to make cruelty sound loyal. It endangers the men who fear a king with a living wolf more than they fear a kingdom ruled by chains." The silver circle cracked. Thalric shouted, "That is not an answer. It is the only true one." The black feather mantle exploded from Vesper's shoulders, not away from her, but outward, filling the space between Rowan and his wolf shadow with a shield shaped like open wings. The severance clause struck. For a moment, the whole hall turned white. When sight returned, Rowan was on one knee, breathing hard, one hand pressed to the stone. His wolf shadow remained behind him, still wounded, still alive, still his. But the black antler circlet above the throne had changed. Its inner carvings were bleeding. Not light. Names. Hundreds of names appeared along the antlers, written in red-black strokes. Buried guardians, sealed children, dead wolves, vanished packs. And at the very center, freshly carved where no name had been before, appeared Vesper's full name. Vesper Stormwing Rowe. Thalric stared at it with open hatred. Then the chain of testimony snapped around his wrist like a living snake, and he smiled through the pain. "Good," he whispered. "Now the crown has named her." The bleeding names on the circlet flared. A new vow formed in the air above Vesper. If the guardian is named by the crown may command her shield. Rowan rose too late. The vow descended toward Vesper's throat like a silver collar. Rowan's sword struck the throne steps before the silver law could close. The sound split the hall like thunder inside stone. Every noble flinched. The old antler relic above the throne jerked in its iron cradle, and the pale command circling Vesper's throat faltered for half a breath. It was not enough to break it, but it was enough for her to drag air into her lungs. Lord Thalric Hallowick laughed softly. "Steel cannot cut first law, Majesty." Rowan stood between Vesper and the throne, his blade lowered but ready, his wolf shadow rising behind him with its wounded throat bared. "Then first law can explain why it needs to collar a girl to survive." That line reached the court. Vesper saw it move across faces. Discomfort, fear, anger, calculation. Thornmere nobles had accepted exile cloaks, scent rights, buried foundations, and crown clauses because each had been wrapped in ceremonial language. But a collar was harder to polish. The silver command tightened again. Vesper's breath caught. Her black feather mantle tried to lift between her and the law, but the new vow had been written carefully. It did not attack her. It claimed authority over the shield itself. If the guardian is named by the crown may command her shield. The words pressed against her skin without touching it. Her shoulders burned where the feathers had fused. She felt the mantle's power waiting for instruction, and that frightened her more than pain, because it wanted to obey. Not Thalric, not the court, the old shape of law. Mara Rowe dragged herself forward across the cracked stones, silver chains scraping behind her. "Vesper, do not answer it with fear." Thalric's eyes flashed. "Silence the buried traitor." Two guards moved toward Mara. Rowan's wolf shadow snarled. The guards stopped. Not because they were brave enough to disobey Thalric, because the beast's shadow fell across them, and some older instinct reminded their bones what wolves were before courts taught them manners. Vesper raised one shaking hand to the silver pressure around her throat. It did not feel like metal. It felt like being named by someone who had no right to know her. Thalric stepped toward her, calm returning now that the trap had its teeth in place. "Shield the crown, Vesper Stormwing Rowe." The mantle stiffened. Rowan turned sharply. "Do not." Thalric smiled. "He cannot stop you from obeying royal law. That is the beauty of restored standing. A nameless girl may be ignored. A named guardian may be commanded." Vesper's feathers opened. Against her will, they spread from her shoulders in a dark fan, edges bright with moonlight. Half the court recoiled. The other half watched with hungry relief. If Thalric could command her, then the old order was not a threat. It was another tool. Vesper felt the command seek a target. Shield the crown. The crown meant the throne. The throne meant the law. The law meant the vows. And the vows were killing Rowan's wolf. Her feathers began to turn toward Rowan. His face did not change. That almost destroyed her. He did not plead, did not accuse, did not step away. He simply stood there, blade in hand, watching the girl he had chosen not to cage become a weapon built to cage him. Vesper's breath came apart. "I do not want this," she whispered. Thalric heard and leaned closer. "Want has never ruled Thornmere. Oath has." Mara lifted her head. "Choice is the first oath." The buried white wolf skeleton below the floor opened its jaws. This time, its voice did not speak in words. It howled. The sound tore through the silver command, not breaking it, but showing its shape. Vesper saw the collar clearly now, not a circle, but a sentence with one missing piece. Thalric had invoked crown authority, but he had not invoked guardian consent because he believed consent was an old superstition buried with the bodies. The first shield is given, never taken. The knowledge entered Vesper, like a blade placed handle first in her palm. She closed her eyes. Her feathers stopped turning. Thalric's smile died. Vesper opened her eyes and looked at Rowan. "I will not shield your crown." The court erupted. Rowan's gaze held hers, unreadable for one hard breath. Then she continued, "I will shield your wolf from the crown that has been killing it." The black feather mantle exploded outward. Not at Rowan. Around him. The feathers swept past his shoulders, not touching his flesh, and drove themselves into the air between his wolf shadow and the throne. Each feather struck an invisible strand of oath law and pinned it to the stone like a nailed serpent. White lines appeared across the hall, hundreds of them, all leading from the antler relic to Rowan's wolf. The court saw the net at last. Gasps turned to horror. Every ceremony, every loyalty vow, every pledge spoken under the high circlet. All of it had been feeding a beautiful cage. Rowan looked up at the visible web, and something colder than rage entered his face. Thalric shouted, "She corrupts the sight of the court!" "No," Rowan said. "She has given it sight." His wolf shadow stepped forward. The movement shook dust from the banners. For the first time, the beast came near the throne without collapsing. The black feathers held the killing strands away from its throat. It lowered its head beside Rowan, enormous and scarred, and the court saw the two shadows align, man and wolf, not master and monster, not crown and beast, but one life divided by law and trying to become whole. Thalric tore the chain of testimony from his wrist. Blood ran down his fingers. "If the crown cannot command the guardian," he said, voice raw, "then the court must strip her standing." He turned to the nobles. "By council majority, we declare Stormwing blood unlawful." A beat of stunned silence. Then, one by one, the old houses lifted their hands. Not all. Enough. Vesper felt the law shift under her feet. Rowan's sword rose. "Lower your hands." No one did. Thalric's face twisted with triumph. "You see, Majesty, a king may sympathize, a wolf may rage, but courts rule by numbers, and numbers do not need courage." The silver command around Vesper's throat changed. It became colder, sharper. If the guardian is unlawful, the shield may be harvested for the crown. Mara screamed, "Vesper!" The feather mantle tore into light. Pain ripped through Vesper so violently she dropped to her knees. Feathers began pulling free from her shoulders, not flying by choice, but being dragged toward the antler relic. The crown would not command her now. It would consume her and use what remained. Rowan caught her before she hit the stone. His arms closed around her, and his wolf shadow threw itself over them both. The oath net shrieked as the beast's body struck it. Thalric lifted both bloody hands. "Now, Majesty, choose. Save your wolf or save the girl." Vesper tried to push Rowan away. "Do not let him make me the chain." Rowan's voice was low against her hair. "He does not get to choose what I save." Above them, the high circlet split open, revealing a hidden core of silver bone. Inside it beat a small black heart made of woven vows. Thalric's true binding. Not in the antlers. Not in the chain. In the heart of the crown itself. Vesper looked up through pain and saw the black heart open like an eye. And it spoke in Rowan's voice. Rule above the wolf. Rowan went utterly still, not because the crown had spoken, but because it had stolen his voice. The hidden black heart inside the high circlet pulsed above the throne steps, wet with silver light, woven from old vows so tightly that it no longer looked like law. It looked alive. Every beat dragged another feather from Vesper's shoulders. Each one tore free in a flash of pain and flew upward, pulled toward the antler relic to be stripped, melted, and remade into obedience. Rowan held her against him as his wolf shadow arched above them, taking the worst of the oath net across its scarred back. The beast was dying again. Vesper felt it through the floor, through Rowan's breath, through the feathers leaving her body one by one. The court had made the same trap 100 different ways. Save the wolf, lose the girl. Save the girl, lose the wolf. Save the throne, lose them both. Lord Thalric Hallowick stood beneath the broken relic with blood on both hands and triumph in his eyes. "Do you understand now, Majesty?" he said. "A crown survives by placing one life above another. That is rule. That is civilization." Rowan's arm tightened around Vesper, not enough to hurt. Enough to keep her from being dragged fully toward the relic. His voice came low. "And you call this loyalty? I call it preservation." "No," Vesper said through her teeth. "You call hunger by holy names." Thalric looked down at her as if a blade on the floor had spoken. "You still think this is about you?" Pain flashed white behind her eyes as another feather tore loose. Her mantle was thinning. The shield around Rowan's wolf shadow flickered. The oath net pressed closer, silver strands cutting through moonlit smoke. No, she realized. It was not about her. That was the oldest lie. The court had made her scentlessness about shame. Thalric had made her bloodline about danger. The crown had made her shield about property. Every law in the room had tried to turn a living choice into a thing someone else could own. Vesper stopped trying to pull the feathers back. Rowan felt the change. "Vesper." She lifted one shaking hand and placed it against his chest, where his heart beat hard beneath black armor. "Let me stand. If I release you, it takes you. Not if I stop letting it pull what I have not given." He looked at her then, and something in his face cracked. Not control. Not strength. The loneliness beneath both. "I will not trade you for my wolf." "You are not trading me." Her voice shook, but it did not break. "You are trusting me to choose what I was born to protect." His eyes searched hers. Around them, nobles watched with the greedy terror of people who needed someone else to decide what courage cost. Slowly, Rowan released her. The oath net screamed. Vesper rose on unsteady feet. The remaining feathers across her shoulders flared outward, but she did not aim them at the crown. She did not aim them at Thalric. She turned instead toward Rowan's wolf shadow, standing between it and the throne with her back to the court. The beast lowered its massive head until its wounded muzzle hovered inches from her face. It could have devoured her. It did not. Vesper placed both hands against the iron feathers still embedded in its throat. "I do not shield crowns," she whispered. "I do not shield lies. I do not shield men from the consequences of their fear." The black heart above the throne beat faster. Thalric's voice sharpened. "Finish the harvest." The remaining feathers began to tear. Vesper held on. "I shield living wolves from false vows." The buried chamber beneath the hall answered. Stone split from the oath circle to the throne. The white wolf skeleton rose fully from below, silver word chains falling from its ribs in broken loops. Around it came a storm of buried black feathers, hundreds, then thousands, each one carrying a name the court had erased. Stormwing, Hollowmere, Ashfen, Grey Aster, Moonbarrow, shield lines, hidden children, dead guardians, wolves buried under laws that had called them traitors. Mara Rowe lifted her chained wrists and wept without sound. The buried feathers did not fly to the crown. They flew to Vesper, not onto her body, around her choice. The harvest snapped. The silver collar around her throat shattered into sparks. Thalric staggered back. Impossible. Mara's voice rose, raw but clear. "A shield taken is a chain. A shield given is law older than yours." Rowan stepped beside Vesper. His wolf shadow lifted behind them, trembling, half-armored, bleeding white light, but no longer alone. The black heart in the crown opened wider, and Rowan's stolen voice poured from it again, commanding, cold, perfect. "Obey above the beast." This time Rowan answered, not loudly. He did not need to. "I am the beast." The hall stopped breathing. Thalric's face went slack with horror. Rowan took one step toward the throne, and his wolf shadow moved with him, not behind, not beneath, with. The oath net tried to tighten, but Vesper's feathers held it apart, each buried name becoming a point of resistance. The old law had required a king to stand above his wolf. Rowan walked into the command as one being divided only by the court's fear. The first silver strand broke, then another, then 100. Thalric lunged for the chain of testimony. Council authority overrides. Rowan's wolf shadow struck, not with teeth, with breath. A blast of moon-white force tore the chain from Thalric's hands and pinned it against the stone floor. Every cracked link opened, spilling hidden vows like pale worms into the light. The court saw them at last. Commands buried under blessings, punishments hidden inside loyalty, severance clauses woven beneath coronation vows, exile laws designed to erase any bloodline that could challenge the vow-keepers. The old houses began stepping back from Thalric. He saw it. Fear entered him then, true and late. "You needed me," he said to them, "all of you. You wanted tame kings. You wanted wolves that could not turn on council hands. Do not pretend purity now." No one answered. That silence was its own confession. Vesper looked at Rowan. The heart. He nodded once. Together, they climbed the throne steps. The black heart of woven vows thrashed inside the split circlet, beating harder as they neared. It spoke now in many voices. Rowan's, Thalric's, dead kings, frightened councils, mothers begging for children to be spared, wolves screaming under law. Vesper's feathers formed a shield around Rowan's hand. Rowan reached through it and seized the heart. Pain struck them both. Vesper tasted iron, snow, and every silence forced upon her since childhood. Rowan dropped to one knee but did not release the heart. His wolf shadow roared behind him, not in agony now, but effort. Thalric crawled forward. "If you break it, every vow sworn beneath that crown may fail." Rowan looked at him. "Good." He crushed the black heart. The high circlet split from antler tip to base. A wave of white moonfire burst through the hall of Thornmere, striking every oath ring, every testimony chain, every sealed record hidden in noble blood. It did not burn flesh, it burned false authority. Men and women cried out as stolen clauses fell from their tongues. Guards dropped to their knees, not before Vesper, not before Rowan, but under the shock of feeling their own wills return. Rowan's wolf shadow rose whole. The wounds did not vanish as if they had never existed. They closed into pale scars across its throat and ribs, bright reminders rather than open chains. The iron feathers softened from armor into dark moonlit plumage along its shoulders, a shield no longer forced, but chosen. Vesper swayed. Rowan caught her. This time, when his arms came around her, she leaned into him for one breath because she chose that too. The court saw it and did not dare name it. Thalric lay at the foot of the throne, the broken chain of testimony coiled around him like a dead serpent. Without its power, he looked smaller, older, a man who had mistaken control for wisdom until wisdom no longer recognized him. Rowan descended the steps with Vesper beside him. Not behind, beside. He stood before the court, his wolf shadow at his shoulder, its great scarred head level with his crownless brow. "Lord Thalric Hallowick," Rowan said, "you will live." Thalric's eyes flickered with desperate relief. Rowan's voice hardened. "You will live long enough to read every buried name back into Thornmere's records, every guardian, every sealed child, every wolf severed from a king, every exile made by a vow you rewrote. You will speak them until your chain remembers shame." Mara bowed her head, shaking. The buried white wolf skeleton lowered itself beside her, its ancient duty finally released. The remaining silver chains fell from Mara's wrists and turned to dust. Vesper crossed to her mother. For a moment she was not guardian, not witness, not shield. Only a daughter kneeling before the woman who had chosen absence over a chain. Mara touched Vesper's face with trembling fingers. "I wanted you free." Vesper closed her eyes. "I was lonely." "I know." No apology could return the years. But truth sat between them, painful and alive, and for now, that was more than Thornmere had ever allowed them. Rowan waited until Vesper rose. Then, before nobles, wolves, servants, and the exposed old houses, the Alpha King removed the broken remnant of the high circlet from the throne and laid it at her feet. Not as surrender, as recognition. "Vesper Stormwing Rowe," he said, "your bloodline owes my crown nothing, but if you choose to stand in this court, you will stand as free shield, named witness, and keeper of the vows my throne can no longer be trusted to right alone." The hall was silent. Vesper looked at the broken antlers, then at Rowan. His pale grey eyes held no command. His wolf shadow watched her with the same fierce restraint, scarred and whole, waiting without claim. The choice was hers. That was what made it frightening. That was what made it real. "I will stay," Vesper said, "until every buried name is returned." A faint smile touched Rowan's mouth, brief as moonlight on a blade. "Then Thornmere will learn to fear honest records." Despite everything, Vesper almost smiled back. Almost. Behind them, the first dawn light entered the hall. It struck the black feathers still circling the broken throne, turning their edges silver. Wolves across the court lifted their heads and breathed in the scent that had been hidden from them for years. Rein on Iron, feathers under snow, a winged wolf beneath a storm moon. And for the first time in her life, no one called Vesper scentless.